The thunder of hooves echoed across the dusty plains as Bethany Zimmerman clutched the reins of her exhausted mare, glancing over her shoulder at the three riders gaining on her with each passing moment. Her heart pounded against her ribs, matching the rhythm of her horse's galloping hooves. She had never imagined that her journey to Trinity, Texas, would turn into a desperate race for survival. The year was 1874, and the Texas frontier remained a lawless expanse where danger lurked behind every mesa and sagebrush. Bethany had left behind the comforts of Boston society 6 months ago after her father's financial ruin and subsequent death. The scandal had shattered her family's standing, leaving her with nothing but a distant cousin's address in Trinity and the promise of a new beginning. "Come on, girl," Bethany whispered to her mare, leaning forward in the saddle. "Just a little farther." The riders behind her shouted, their calls carried on the hot Texas wind. They'd been following her since she'd stopped at a creek to water her horse an hour ago. Three rough-looking men with unshaven faces and predatory grins who'd made their intentions clear enough without saying a word. Bethany's mare stumbled, nearly throwing her from the saddle. The poor animal was at its limit after days of hard travel. The town of Trinity should be just beyond the next rise, according to her map, but the horse wouldn't make it much farther. A gunshot cracked through the air and Bethany ducked instinctively. They were shooting at her now. Tears of frustration stung her eyes. After everything she'd endured, the scandal, her father's suicide, the whispers and stares to die here in the dirt of Texas, seemed a cruel joke. The sound of more hoofbeats caught her attention, coming not from behind, but from her right. A lone rider appeared on the ridge, tall in the saddle, moving with purpose. He rode directly toward the path between Bethany and her pursuers. "Keep going," the stranger shouted, his voice carrying across the distance. "Straight ahead to town." He raised a rifle to his shoulder, and 2 warning shots exploded into the air. Bethany's pursuers slowed, clearly reassessing the situation now that the odds had changed. Bethany urged her exhausted horse forward, not daring to look back again until she crested the final hill. Below her, Trinity spread out along a creek bed, a collection of wooden buildings, a church steeple, and the promise of safety. She guided her mare down the slope, the animal's strength nearly spent by the time she reached the main street. Her mare was stumbling with every step. Bethany slid from the saddle outside what appeared to be the town's general store, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. A small crowd had gathered, drawn by the sound of gunfire on the outskirts of town. "Miss, are you all right?" An older woman approached, concern etched on her weathered face. Bethany opened her mouth to respond, but exhaustion and relief overwhelmed her. The world tilted sideways as she collapsed into the dust of Trinity's main street. When Bethany awoke, she found herself in an unfamiliar bed, sunlight streaming through lace curtains. For a moment, she thought she was back in Boston, that the past months had been nothing but a terrible dream. Then the soreness in her muscles and the unfamiliar surroundings brought reality crashing back. "You're awake. Good." The same older woman from the street stood in the doorway, holding a tray with a steaming cup. "I'm Martha Wilson. You collapsed in front of my husband's store yesterday." "Yesterday?" Bethany struggled to sit up. "I've been asleep that long," Martha nodded, setting the tray beside the bed. "You were exhausted, poor thing, those men chasing you. Well, you're safe now." "There was a rider," Bethany said, accepting the cup of tea Martha offered. "He distracted them so I could escape." "That would be Cole Adams," Martha said with a knowing smile, "our local ranch foreman. He brought your horse to the livery after making sure those miscreants continued on their way." Bethany sipped the tea, letting its warmth soothe her. "I need to thank him. You'll have your chance. He said he'd stop by later to check on you." Martha smoothed her apron. "Now, what brings a young lady like yourself to Trinity all alone? It's not exactly the safest way to travel." Bethany hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I'm looking for my cousin, Eliza Chambers. She's my only remaining family." Martha's expression shifted subtly. "Eliza's place is at the edge of town. She keeps to herself mostly." Something in the woman's tone suggested there was more to the story, but Bethany was too tired to press. "I have a letter for her. She doesn't know I'm coming." "Well, you rest today. Tomorrow's soon enough to pay your cousin a visit." Martha patted Bethany's hand. I'll bring you something to eat shortly." After Martha left, Bethany sank back against the pillows. She'd come so far, endured so much, only to sense that more challenges awaited her in Trinity. Her father's last words echoed in her mind. "Find Eliza. She'll understand what needs to be done." What had he meant? Bethany had never even met this cousin, only knew of her through occasional mentions in her father's correspondence. Whatever secrets lay between them had died with her father, or so she thought. Later that afternoon, a knock at the bedroom door roused Bethany from a light doze. She dressed in the clean clothes. Martha had provided a simple brown skirt and white blouse that were slightly too large but infinitely better than her travel-worn attire. "Miss Zimmerman, you have a visitor." Martha stepped aside, revealing a tall man with broad shoulders filling the doorframe. Cole Adams removed his hat as he entered, revealing dark hair tinged with copper where the sun had kissed it. His face was tanned from long hours outdoors, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often. Right now, however, his expression was serious, assessing. "Madam," he said with a slight nod, "good to see you recovered, Mr. Adams." Bethany straightened her posture automatically, her Boston upbringing asserting itself. "I understand I owe you my thanks for your timely intervention yesterday." A hint of a smile touched his lips. No debt owed. Couldn't exactly ride past a lady in distress. Martha excused herself, leaving them alone with the door ajar for propriety's sake. "Those men," Bethany asked, "do you know who they were?" Cole leaned against the wall, crossing his arms over his chest. "Not by name, drifters most likely." "Looking for easy targets. Then I suppose I appeared quite the easy target. No offense, madam, but a woman traveling alone in these parts might as well have a sign saying 'Please rob me' pinned to her back." There was no mockery in his tone, only matter-of-fact honesty. "I didn't have much choice in the matter," Bethany replied, a touch of defensiveness creeping into her voice. Cole studied her for a long moment. "Martha says you're looking for Eliza Chambers, my cousin. Do you know her?" Something flickered across his face, caution, perhaps. "Everyone knows everyone in Trinity. It's not a big place." "But you know her specifically," Bethany pressed, sensing his evasiveness. "I do." He straightened up. "And I know that showing up unexpected at her door might not get you the welcome you're hoping for." "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Adams, but Eliza is my family." "I'm sure once I explain my situation, your situation," he interrupted, his gaze sharpening. Bethany hesitated. Her father's disgrace wasn't something she wished to discuss with a stranger, no matter how helpful he'd been. "My personal circumstances that brought me here." Cole nodded slowly, accepting her privacy. "Fair enough. I just thought you should know that Eliza, she's particular about visitors." "Noted." Bethany met his gaze. "Will you be the one to take me to her tomorrow?" He seemed surprised by the question. "I wasn't planning on it. I've got work at the Double Creek Ranch, of course. I didn't mean to presume." Bethany looked away, embarrassed. Cole shifted his hat in his hands. "But I could escort you there before I head out, if you'd like." "That would be kind of you, Mr. Adams." He placed his hat back on his head. "Cole, Mr. Adams was my father. Then you must call me Bethany." A genuine smile finally broke across his face, transforming his features. "All right then, Bethany, I'll come by after sunrise." After he left, Bethany moved to the window, watching as he strode down the street toward the livery. There was something about Cole Adams that intrigued her, a straightforwardness that was refreshing after the veiled conversations and social maneuvering of Boston society. She turned away from the window, her gaze falling on her travel bag where Martha had placed it. Inside was the letter her father had written to Eliza before his death, sealed and entrusted to Bethany with instructions to deliver it personally. Alongside it was a small leather-bound journal with a peculiar lock that had no keyhole, another mystery her father had left behind. "Find Eliza," he'd said. "She'll understand what needs to be done." Tomorrow, Bethany would finally discover what those cryptic words meant. The morning brought clear skies and a chill that promised to burn off with the rising sun. Bethany dressed carefully in her own clothes, now cleaned and pressed by Martha's diligent hands. Her navy traveling dress was plain by Boston standards, but felt like armor as she prepared to meet her unknown cousin. Cole arrived as promised, leading two horses, Bethany's rested mare and his own chestnut gelding. "Your mount's recovered nicely," he said by way of greeting. "Martha said to tell you breakfast is waiting before we ride out." Breakfast was a hearty affair of eggs, bacon, and biscuits with honey. Martha's husband, George Wilson, joined them, a quiet man who seemed content to let his wife lead the conversation. Bethany learned that they'd run the general store for 20 years, raising 3 children who'd all moved to larger towns as adults. "Trinity's not growing like some places," George finally contributed. "Young folks want more excitement than we offer here. It seems peaceful," Bethany observed. Martha and George exchanged a glance that made Bethany wonder what remained unsaid. After breakfast, Cole helped Bethany onto her horse. The mare seemed eager after her day of rest, prancing slightly beneath her. "Eliza's place is about 2 miles east," Cole explained as they rode out of town. "It's not much to look at, but the land's good." They rode in companionable silence for a time, the morning air warming around them. Trinity disappeared behind them as they followed a dirt road through scrubby mesquite and occasional oak trees. "You handle that horse well," Cole observed. "Been riding long, since childhood. My father believed in proper exercise for young ladies even if society didn't always agree." Bethany smiled at the memory. "He used to say a woman who could ride could go anywhere, wise man. He was." Her smile faded. "At least I thought so." Cole gave her a sidelong glance but didn't press. Instead, he pointed ahead. "That's Eliza's place coming up." A small farmhouse appeared around the bend, whitewashed with a front porch that wrapped around one side. A vegetable garden stretched behind it, and a few chickens pecked in the yard. It looked well kept but modest. As they approached, the front door opened, and a woman stepped onto the porch. Even from a distance, Bethany could see the family resemblance, the same tall, slender build and dark hair that marked the Zimmerman line. Eliza shaded her eyes, watching their approach with a stance that suggested wariness rather than welcome. "She's already spotted us," Cole murmured. "Doesn't miss much, your cousin." They halted their horses at the edge of the yard. Cole dismounted first, then helped Bethany down. The morning's ride had left her stiffer than she'd anticipated. "Morning, Eliza," Cole called. "Brought you a visitor." Eliza remained on the porch, one hand resting on the post. She wore a simple dress of faded blue, her dark hair pulled back in a practical knot. Her eyes, the same deep brown as Bethany's own, narrowed as she studied her unexpected guest. "You're George's girl," she said finally. "Henry's daughter." Bethany stepped forward. "Yes, I'm Bethany, your cousin. I know who you are." Eliza's tone wasn't unfriendly, just matter of fact. "Wasn't expecting you, I know. I apologize for arriving without notice." Bethany glanced at Cole, who nodded encouragingly. "My father, he passed away. Before he did, he asked me to find you." Something flickered across Eliza's face, concern, perhaps, or resignation. She sighed and gestured toward the house. "You'd better come in then." Cole cleared his throat. "I should head to the ranch. Mr. Blackburn will be wondering where I am." "Wait." Bethany turned to him. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Adams Cole. I don't know how to repay your kindness." "No repayment necessary." His smile was warm. "Welcome to Trinity, Bethany Zimmerman." As Cole rode away, Bethany felt a curious sense of loss. In just a day, he'd become an unexpected ally in this strange new place. Eliza watched Cole's departure with an unreadable expression. "Cole Adams is a good man," she said finally. "One of the few in these parts." She turned and entered the house without waiting for a response, leaving Bethany to follow. The interior was simple but comfortable, a small sitting room with handmade quilts draped over worn furniture, a kitchen visible through an open doorway, and stairs leading to what must be bedrooms above. "Sit," Eliza instructed, gesturing to a chair. She remained standing, arms crossed. "Now tell me why you're really here." Bethany reached into her bag and withdrew the sealed letter. "My father asked me to deliver this to you personally." Eliza stared at the envelope as if it might contain a venomous snake. Slowly, she took it from Bethany's outstretched hand. "Henry always did have a flair for the dramatic." "There's more." Bethany hesitated. "Before he died, he said you would understand what needs to be done about the journal." At the mention of the journal, Eliza's posture stiffened. "Show me." Bethany withdrew the leather-bound book with its strange lock. Eliza took it, turning it over in her hands with a familiarity that suggested she'd seen it before. "I couldn't open it," Bethany explained. "There's no key. It doesn't need one." Eliza ran her finger along the spine, pressing in a particular spot. Something clicked and the lock sprang open. "How did you— This was my father's," Eliza interrupted. "Your grandfather's. Henry had no right to take it when he left for Boston." The accusation hung in the air between them. Bethany's confusion must have shown on her face because Eliza's expression softened slightly. "You don't know, do you?" Eliza asked. "Why your father really sent you here? He said you were family, that I'd be safe with you after." Bethany swallowed. "After his disgrace." Eliza snorted. "Disgrace, that's one way to put it." She tapped the letter against her palm, still unopened. "You look tired. There's a spare room upstairs. You can stay while we figure this out." "Figure what out?" Bethany asked, frustration creeping into her voice. "Please, Eliza, I've traveled for weeks. My father is dead. I have nothing left in Boston. At least tell me what this is about." Eliza studied her for a long moment. "Your father wasn't just disgraced, Bethany. He was running. The question is whether what was chasing him followed you here." Before Bethany could respond, a sound outside caught their attention: approaching horses. Eliza moved swiftly to the window, peering out through the curtain. "Damn," she muttered. "It's the Blackburn boys, and they look like they're here for more than a social call." The name registered immediately. Blackburn? Cole mentioned working for a Mr. Blackburn. Victor Blackburn owns the biggest ranch in the county. His sons are another matter entirely. Eliza tucked the journal and letter into her pocket. "Stay inside." She grabbed a shotgun from beside the door and stepped onto the porch. Bethany, ignoring the instruction, followed close behind. 3 riders had stopped in the yard, young men with a family resemblance that marked them as brothers. The one in front, perhaps in his late 20s, tipped his hat with mock politeness. "Miss Chambers, lovely day." "What do you want, James?" Eliza asked, keeping the shotgun visible but pointed down, just being neighborly. His gaze shifted to Bethany. "Heard there was a new arrival in town. Thought we'd welcome her properly." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "She's my family," Eliza said firmly, "and this is private property." The second brother leaned forward in his saddle. "Heard she had some trouble on the road yesterday. Lucky old Cole was riding by." "If that's all, you can consider your welcome delivered," Eliza replied coldly. James Blackburn's smile faded. "Pa wants to talk to you about selling this place, Eliza. Offer still stands. Be a shame if you had to leave in a hurry like others we know." The threat wasn't subtle. Eliza raised the shotgun slightly. "I think you boys should move along now." After a tense moment, James nodded to his brothers. "We'll be seeing you around, Miss Chambers, and your cousin too." His gaze lingered on Bethany in a way that made her skin crawl. As they rode away, Bethany turned to Eliza. "What was that about?" Eliza lowered the shotgun, her knuckles white around its barrel. "That was about your father's past catching up to us both." Back inside, Eliza finally opened the letter, reading it in silence while Bethany waited. Whatever its contents, they caused Eliza's expression to harden. "Your father," she said eventually, "was both clever and foolish in equal measure." "What did he write?" Eliza refolded the letter carefully. "He admits what I already knew, that he stole from my father, his own brother, before leaving for Boston. What I didn't know was that he used that money to buy partnership in a mining venture, one that made him very wealthy until recently." Bethany shook her head in disbelief. "My father built his business through hard work. He always said he lied," Eliza cut in. "The truth is in this journal. Your grandfather kept detailed records of everything, including the money your father took, but that's not what matters now." "Then what does?" Victor Blackburn. "According to this letter, your father owed him a substantial sum money he invested in Blackburn's railroad interests. When your father's business collapsed, Blackburn was left holding worthless notes. And he wants recompense," Bethany surmised, her heart sinking. "More than that. Your father writes that Blackburn may have been responsible for his financial ruin in the first place." Eliza tapped the letter. "He also claims to have evidence of Blackburn's illegal dealings, evidence hidden somewhere on this property. That's why he sent me here." That's why the Blackburns are suddenly interested in buying land they've ignored for years. Eliza's gaze was calculating, and why they took such immediate interest in you. Bethany felt dizzy with the implications. What do we do? First, Eliza said firmly, we need to warn Cole Adams. If he's working for Blackburn, he might be in danger too, especially after helping you. The Double Creek Ranch sprawled across 5,000 acres of prime Texas grazing land. From the main house on the hill, Victor Blackburn could survey his domain like a king cattle below, workers scurrying about their tasks, and the distant town of Trinity dependent on his goodwill for survival. Cole Adams had been foreman at Double Creek for 3 years. He'd earned the position through hard work and an innate understanding of both cattle and men. Victor respected him, even if his sons did not. Cole was in the barn when the Blackburn brothers returned. James dismounted with the fluid grace of a man born to ride, handing his reins to a stable boy without acknowledgement. Adams, he called. Pa's looking for you. Cole set down the saddle he'd been repairing. Something wrong with the north herd, not the herd. James smirked. Seems you've been playing hero to a certain lady from back east. Cole kept his expression neutral, just doing what anyone would. Not everyone would escort her to Eliza Chambers' place. The youngest Blackburn, Thomas, added, That's interesting company you're keeping. Miss Zimmerman is Eliza's cousin, Cole replied evenly. She asked for directions, I provided them. James stepped closer. At 32, he was older than Cole by 4 years, but they were evenly matched in height and build. Pa doesn't like surprises, Cole. Especially not when they involve Zimmermans. Then he can tell me that himself. Cole moved to step around them, but the middle brother, William, blocked his path. You sure you know which side you're on, Adams? William asked, his hand resting casually near his holstered pistol. Cole held his gaze. I'm on the side of doing my job, which right now means checking on your father's cattle, unless you want to explain to him why that's not getting done. The implied threat of Victor Blackburn's displeasure was enough. The brothers stepped aside, though James left with a parting shot. Just remember who signs your pay, Adams. Cole found Victor Blackburn in his study, a glass of whiskey in one hand and a ledger open before him. At 55, he remained imposing, tall and broad-shouldered with iron-gray hair and a trimmed beard that emphasized rather than softened his square jaw. Cole. Victor gestured to a chair without looking up. Sit. Cole remained standing. James said you wanted to see me. Victor finally raised his eyes. I hear you played rescuer yesterday, just happened to be in the right place. And today you escorted the young lady to Eliza Chambers' farm. Victor closed the ledger. An interesting coincidence, no coincidence. Miss Zimmerman mentioned she was looking for her cousin. I offered to show her the way. Victor studied him for a long moment. You've been with me for 3 years, Cole. I value your work. That's why I'm going to give you some advice. He leaned forward. Stay away from Bethany Zimmerman and her cousin. May I ask why, sir? You may not. Victor's tone was final. Just understand that there's history there. Complicated history. Cole nodded slowly. Is that all, Mr. Blackburn? For now, Victor waved a dismissive hand. The herd in the north pasture needs moving tomorrow. See to it. Outside the main house, Cole mounted his horse and rode toward the northern edge of Blackburn property. His mind wasn't on cattle, however, but on the warning he'd just received and the subtle threat behind it. In 3 years, he'd never questioned Victor Blackburn's orders. The man paid fair wages and generally treated his workers well, if distantly. His sons were another matter, entitled and cruel when their father wasn't watching, but Cole had managed to keep his distance from them. Now, though, something felt wrong. The hostility toward Eliza Chambers and her cousin seemed personal, beyond the usual land disputes that occasionally flared between neighbors. Cole changed direction, heading toward town instead of the north pasture. Whatever was happening, he needed more information before choosing his next move. In Trinity, the afternoon was giving way to evening when Cole tied his horse outside the telegraph office. Inside, he found Samuel Harris, the operator, closing up for the day. Cole, Samuel greeted him. Just in time, was about to lock up. Need to send a telegram, Sam. Important enough to keep me from my dinner. The older man raised an eyebrow. Cole placed a silver dollar on the counter. I'd consider it a personal favor. Samuel pocketed the coin. Who you sending to? Marshal Robert Parker in Fort Worth. Cole had served under Parker during his brief stint as a deputy before coming to Trinity. Need to ask about anyone looking for a Bethany Zimmerman or Henry Zimmerman from Boston. Samuel's eyebrows rose. That the young lady who arrived yesterday. The one you rescued. News traveled fast in Trinity. Cole nodded. Just being cautious. Cautious enough to risk crossing Victor Blackburn. Samuel was no fool. Those boys of his have been asking questions about her all day. I'm aware, Cole said grimly. Which is why I need to know what I'm dealing with. Samuel sighed and sat back down at his telegraph. This'll take time to get a response. I'll wait. Might be tomorrow before Parker replies. Cole nodded. Then I'll check back tomorrow. As he left the telegraph office, Cole considered his next move. His instincts told him that Bethany and Eliza might be in danger, but rushing back to the farm without more information could make things worse. He headed to the Wilsons' general store, hoping Martha might have insights she hadn't shared earlier. The store was still open, with George stacking canned goods on a shelf. Evening, Cole, George greeted him. Martha's in back if you're looking for her. Cole found Martha in the storeroom, taking inventory. She looked up as he entered, her expression unsurprised. I wondered when you'd come asking, she said, setting down her pencil. Close the door. Cole did as instructed, leaning against it. What do you know about Bethany Zimmerman and her connection to the Blackburns? Martha crossed her arms. That's a long story and not all of it fit for sharing. I need to know if she's in danger. The older woman studied him. Why do you care so much about a woman you just met? It was a fair question. Cole had been asking himself the same thing. There was something about Bethany that had struck him from the moment he'd seen her, a determination and courage that resonated with him. But it was more than that. Something about the situation felt wrong, and Cole had never been able to walk away from an injustice. Because I think Victor Blackburn is using his position to threaten two women who can't defend themselves, he said finally. And I don't stand for that, no matter who signs my pay. Martha nodded slowly. Henry Zimmerman and Victor Blackburn were business partners years ago, railroad interests mainly. Something happened between them. Henry left for Boston, and Victor stayed, building what you see now. What happened? No one knows for certain. But Eliza's father, Henry's brother, died not long after, leaving her that farm. Victor's been trying to buy it for years. Why? Martha shrugged. Some say there's water rights, others think it's personal. All I know is that whenever a Zimmerman is mentioned, Victor Blackburn gets a look in his eye like he's considering murder. Cole absorbed this information. Do you think Bethany knows any of this? I doubt it. She seemed genuinely surprised by the Blackburns' interest in her. Martha hesitated. Cole, be careful. Victor Blackburn isn't just the biggest rancher around here. He practically owns the sheriff and half the town council. I appreciate the warning. Cole straightened. If Bethany returns to town, I'll keep her safe, Martha promised. But I suspect she'll stay with Eliza for now. Outside, darkness had fallen. Cole mounted his horse, considering his options. The smart move would be to return to the ranch, do his job, and wait for Marshal Parker's response. But the image of James Blackburn's threatening smile when he mentioned Bethany wouldn't leave him. Decision made, Cole turned his horse east, toward Eliza Chambers' farm. The night was clear and cool, with a quarter moon providing just enough light to navigate by. Cole kept to the road for speed, though it made him an easy target if anyone was watching. It took less than 30 minutes to reach the turnoff to Eliza's property. As he approached, he noticed something unusual. No lights burned in the windows. At this hour, there should be at least a lamp or two visible. Cole slowed his horse, suddenly wary. He dismounted 100 yards from the house, tethering his gelding to a mesquite tree before continuing on foot. The silence was unnatural. No dogs barked, though Eliza kept two for protection. Cole drew his revolver, moving forward in a crouch. When he reached the edge of the yard, he paused, listening intently. A faint sound came from behind the house, voices, low and urgent. Cole circled around, staying in the shadows. Near the back porch, he finally spotted movement. Eliza and Bethany leading horses from the small stable. They were dressed for travel with saddlebags already packed. He stepped into a clearing where they could see him, keeping his hands visible. Going somewhere, both women startled. Eliza raised a rifle before recognizing him. "Cole," Bethany whispered, relief evident in her voice. "What are you doing here? I was about to ask you the same thing." He holstered his gun, approaching slowly. "Running doesn't seem like your style, Eliza." "It's not running," Eliza replied tersely. "It's a strategic retreat." "From what?" The women exchanged a glance before Bethany spoke. "James Blackburn returned after you left. He was explicit about what would happen if we didn't cooperate." Cole's jaw tightened. "Did he hurt you?" "No," Bethany assured him. "But his threats were convincing enough. He said we had until morning to decide whether to sell the farm to his father or face consequences." "And you're choosing neither," Cole surmised. Eliza nodded. "We're heading to Fort Worth." "I have friends there who can help us sort this out. Fort Worth is 3 days' hard ride," Cole pointed out, "and the Blackburns know every trail between here and there." "Do you have a better suggestion?" Eliza challenged. Cole considered their options. "Yes, but you're not going to like it." An hour later, they approached the abandoned silver mine that had been Cole's first job when he arrived in Texas. It had played out years ago, but the entrance remained intact, tucked into a hillside 3 miles west of Trinity. "No one comes here anymore," Cole explained as he dismounted. "The company pulled out when the vein dried up, left everything behind." He led them inside the mine entrance, lighting a lantern he'd retrieved from his saddlebags. The tunnel extended about 50 yards before opening into a larger chamber where equipment still stood, covered in dust. "There's a small cabin around the back where the foreman lived," Cole continued. "It's not much, but it's dry and hidden from the road." Bethany looked around in wonder. "How do you know about this place?" "I worked here before joining Blackburn's outfit." Cole set the lantern on a crate. "Lived in that cabin for 6 months. Eliza remained skeptical. "We can't hide forever, Cole. Sooner or later, the Blackburns will find us." "Not forever," he agreed. "Just long enough to figure out what they really want and why they're suddenly so interested in your farm." "We know what they want," Bethany said quietly. Cole turned to her, questioning. "My father's letter explained everything." Bethany glanced at Eliza, who nodded permission. He and Victor Blackburn were more than business partners. They were involved in land speculation that wasn't entirely legal, buying property using insider information about railroad routes. "That's not uncommon," Cole noted. "No, but bribing officials and threatening competing buyers is," Eliza interjected. According to Henry, Victor crossed lines that could have landed them both in prison. When Henry wanted out, Victor threatened him. That's why he fled to Boston. "With evidence," Bethany added. "Documents that could prove what Blackburn did." "My father hid them somewhere on Eliza's farm before he left. The pieces were starting to fit together. And now Blackburn wants to find those documents." Eliza nodded. "Henry's letter says they're hidden in the old well behind the barn. We were going to retrieve them tonight before leaving." Cole ran a hand through his hair, thinking, "If we get those documents, we might have leverage against Blackburn, enough to make him back off. Or enough to make him desperate," Bethany pointed out. "My father wrote that Victor Blackburn isn't a man who forgives or forgets." "He's right about that," Cole acknowledged. "But right now, those documents are our best chance." He moved toward the entrance. "Stay here, I'll go back to the farm and get whatever's hidden there." "Alone," Bethany stepped forward. "That's too dangerous." "Less dangerous than you two walking into what might be a trap," Cole countered. "The Blackburns don't know about my connection to you, yet at least not officially. I can move more freely." "He's right," Eliza admitted reluctantly. "If James is watching the farm, seeing you return would confirm his suspicions." Bethany still looked unconvinced. "But if they catch you?" "They won't," Cole assured her, touched by her concern. "I know how to move without being seen." "At least take this." Eliza offered him the journal. "It has details about where exactly to look." Cole accepted it, tucking it inside his coat. "I'll be back by dawn if I'm not." He hesitated. "There's a marshal in Fort Worth named Robert Parker. Find him, tell him everything." As he turned to leave, Bethany caught his arm. "Why are you doing this, Cole? You barely know us. This could cost you your job or worse." Cole looked down at her hand on his arm, then met her eyes. "Because it's the right thing to do." There must be more to it than that, she pressed. Something in her gaze made Cole pause. Since his wife had died 3 years earlier, he'd kept to himself, focused on work rather than connections. But meeting Bethany had stirred something he'd thought long buried, an instinct to protect, yes, but also a pull toward her strength and determination. Maybe there is, he admitted quietly. But now's not the time to discuss it. Her hand fell away, but her eyes held his for a moment longer. Be careful, Cole. With a nod, he stepped back into the night. The old well behind Eliza's barn was exactly where the journal described, covered now by wooden planks and half hidden by overgrown brush. Cole approached cautiously, every sense alert for watchers. The farm seemed deserted, but he took no chances, keeping to shadows and moving only when certain he was alone. Removing the planks revealed a dry well shaft extending about 20 feet down. According to the journal, Henry had created a false bottom in the well, concealing a small compartment beneath. Cole lowered himself down using the old rope ladder still attached to one side. The well was narrower than he'd expected, making movement difficult. At the bottom, he knelt, running his hands over the packed earth. It took several minutes to locate the difference in texture that indicated the hidden access point. Digging with his knife, Cole eventually uncovered a small metal box, rusted now but still intact. He tucked it inside his shirt and began the climb back up. He was halfway up the ladder when voices drifted to him from above. Cole froze, barely daring to breathe. "Check the barn again," came James Blackburn's unmistakable drawl. "They might have left something behind." "Already did," replied another voice, William, "most likely. Nothing there. Pa's going to be furious they slipped away. Maybe they didn't go far." The voices were moving away now, toward the house. Cole waited until he could no longer hear them before continuing his silent ascent. At the top, he peered over the edge cautiously. The yard appeared empty, but a lantern light moved within the house, visible through the windows. Cole eased himself out of the well, replacing the planks as quietly as possible. He was making his way toward the tree line when a horse whinnied nearby, not his own, which he'd left tethered a quarter-mile away. He froze, scanning the darkness. The sound had come from behind the barn. Moving silently, Cole circled the structure, hand on his holstered revolver. Thomas Blackburn stood smoking a cigarette, his horse ground tied nearby. At 25, he was the youngest of the brothers and generally considered the least dangerous, though that wasn't saying much. Cole had two options: try to slip past unnoticed or confront him directly. The decision was made for him when Thomas turned and spotted him. "Adams," Thomas's hand moved toward his gun. "Easy," Cole said, raising his empty hands. "I'm not looking for trouble." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here? Victor sent me to check if the women had left." The lie came smoothly. "Wanted to know if they were taking his offer seriously. Pa didn't mention sending you." Thomas hadn't drawn his weapon, but his stance remained alert. "He doesn't tell you everything," Cole countered. "Are James and William inside?" Thomas nodded slowly. "Found the place empty. Looks like they ran. Smart of them." Cole lowered his hands cautiously. "I'll tell your father. He'll want to know right away." For a moment, it seemed Thomas might believe him. Then his gaze dropped to Cole's shirt, where a corner of the metal box had become visible. "What's that?" Thomas drew his gun. "Empty your pockets, Adams." Cole calculated his odds. Thomas was the poorest shot among the brothers, but at this distance, even he couldn't miss. And a gunshot would bring James and William running. "Just something I found," Cole admitted, reaching slowly into his shirt. "Nothing important. Let me be the judge of that." Cole withdrew the box, holding it out. As Thomas reached for it, Cole dropped it and lunged forward, catching the younger man by surprise. They struggled briefly before Cole landed a solid punch that sent Thomas sprawling. Snatching up the box, Cole ran for the trees. Behind him, Thomas shouted for his brothers. A shot rang out, the bullet splintering bark near Cole's head. He reached his horse and mounted in one fluid motion, spurring the animal into a gallop. More shots followed, but distance and darkness made accuracy impossible. Cole rode hard for several minutes before cutting away from the main trail, following a creek bed that would mask his tracks. Only when certain he wasn't being followed did he slow to preserve his horse's strength. Dawn was breaking when he finally returned to the abandoned mine. Bethany rushed out to meet him, her face pale with worry. "We heard gunshots," she said, her eyes searching him for injuries. "We feared the worst." Cole dismounted stiffly, the night's exertions catching up to him. "Had a run-in with Thomas Blackburn, nothing serious." Eliza emerged from the cabin, rifle in hand. "Did you find it?" Cole produced the metal box, now dented from his encounter. "Right where Henry said it would be." Inside the cabin, they gathered around the small table as Eliza worked the rusted lock open. The box contained several folded documents, brittle with age but still legible. "Land deeds," Eliza murmured, scanning the first page. "And letters between Victor and the railroad commissioner." She looked up, her expression grave. Henry wasn't exaggerating. "This is evidence of bribery, fraud, even threats against competitors." "Enough to ruin Blackburn," Cole observed. "Or get us all killed," Bethany added quietly. Cole knew she was right. These papers made them targets for as long as they possessed them. "We need to get these to someone who can use them properly. Marshall Parker in Fort Worth." "That's still a 3-day journey," Eliza reminded him. "And now the Blackburns know you're involved." "They'll be watching every road out of Trinity." "Not every road," Cole countered. "There's an old cattle trail that runs south before turning east, adds a day to the journey but avoids the main routes." Bethany looked between them. "So we leave now, together?" Cole nodded. "The longer we wait, the more time Blackburn has to organize a search." "I'll pack what supplies we have," Eliza said, moving toward the back of the cabin. Left alone with Bethany, Cole finally had a moment to assess his own condition. His knuckles were raw from the fight with Thomas, and a graze along his arm indicated one of the shots had come closer than he'd realized. Bethany noticed immediately. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he dismissed, but she was already tearing a strip from her petticoat to use as a bandage. "Let me see," she insisted, taking his arm. Her touch was gentle as she examined the wound. "Barely broke the skin, but it needs cleaning." She worked in silence for a moment, using water from their canteen to wash the graze before binding it. Cole watched her face as she concentrated, struck by the care in her movements. "Thank you," he said when she finished. "For this and for trusting me last night." Bethany looked up, meeting his gaze. "Why wouldn't I trust you? You've done nothing but help since the moment we met." "Most people aren't so quick to trust strangers." "You're hardly a stranger anymore," she pointed out with a small smile. "Besides, my father always said you can judge a man by his actions in a crisis. Yours have been admirable." The compliment warmed him unexpectedly. "Your father sounds like a complicated man." Her smile faded. "He was. I thought I knew him, but these past months have revealed a different person entirely." She secured the bandage with a neat knot. "The father I knew was principled, generous, dedicated to our community in Boston. Now I learn he was running from a past that included theft and questionable business dealings." "People can be both," Cole offered. "The good parts of him were probably real too, perhaps." Bethany's hands lingered on his arm. "What about you, Cole Adams? Are you hiding any surprising revelations?" The question, though lightly asked, deserved honesty. "Nothing as dramatic as your father. I was a deputy marshal for 2 years before coming to Trinity. Left after my wife died of fever." The words still caught in his throat, though the sharp pain had dulled with time. Bethany's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry. Recently, 3 years ago," Cole gently withdrew his arm. "It was a new marriage, just 6 months, but enough to know what I'd lost." Before Bethany could respond, Eliza returned with their meager supplies packed. "We should move. It'll be full daylight soon." They rode south as Cole had suggested, following the old cattle trail that few used anymore. The day grew hot, the Texas sun beating down mercilessly. They stopped only briefly at midday to rest the horses and share a sparse meal of jerky and hardtack from Cole's saddlebags. "We'll reach the Turner Creek crossing by nightfall," Cole explained as they rode. "There's good cover there to make camp." "And after Fort Worth?" Bethany asked. "What happens then?" It was a question Cole had been avoiding. Delivering the documents to Marshall Parker would likely mean the end of his time in Trinity. Victor Blackburn wouldn't forgive his betrayal. But what that meant for his connection to Bethany remained uncertain. "Let's focus on getting there first," he replied. "One challenge at a time." They reached Turner Creek as the sun was setting. The crossing offered a small clearing surrounded by cottonwoods, with the creek providing fresh water. Cole helped the women dismount, noticing Bethany's wince as her feet touched the ground. "Not used to riding this long," she admitted when he gave her a questioning look. "We'll rest here tonight," Cole decided. "Give the horses a chance to recover too." While Eliza tended to the animals, Cole gathered wood for a small fire. Bethany joined him, collecting smaller kindling. "Won't a fire give away our position?" she asked. "Not if we keep it small and shield it properly." Cole arranged stones to contain the flames. "Besides, these woods are full of panthers. A fire will keep them at a distance." Bethany glanced nervously at the gathering darkness. "Panthers, mountain lions," he clarified. "Not common, but they do hunt at night." "Wonderful," she murmured. As if angry blackburns weren't enough to worry about. Cole couldn't help but smile at her dry tone. Despite everything, Bethany maintained a resilience that impressed him. Where another woman might have collapsed into hysterics given the circumstances, she remained composed, adaptable. The night passed uneventfully. Cole took first watch while the women slept, Eliza with her rifle close at hand even in slumber. When Bethany woke to take her turn at watch, she found Cole still awake, staring into the dying embers of their fire. "You should sleep," she said, settling beside him on the fallen log he'd been using as a seat. "I will, just thinking." "About what comes next," he nodded. "Victor Blackburn won't stop with these documents. Even if we get them to Parker, Eliza's farm isn't safe, and neither are you." "I'm beginning to think nowhere is truly safe," Bethany observed. "In Boston, I was surrounded by people yet utterly alone after my father's death. Here I'm hunted but—" She paused. "Not alone." Their eyes met in the faint glow of the coals. Something unspoken passed between them, recognition of a connection neither had anticipated. "You should get some rest," Bethany said finally, breaking the moment. "I'll wake you at dawn." Cole reluctantly moved to his bedroll, aware that sleep would likely evade him despite his exhaustion. His thoughts kept returning to Bethany, her courage, her adaptability, and the way she looked at him with those earnest brown eyes. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at him that way. The morning brought renewed determination. They set out early, following the winding trail as it eventually turned eastward toward Fort Worth. The terrain grew more rugged, with rocky outcroppings providing both challenge and opportunity for concealment. By mid-afternoon, they had covered significant ground without incident enough to make Cole uneasy. The Blackburns weren't men to give up easily, especially with so much at stake. His concern proved justified as they rounded a bend in the trail. Ahead, 3 riders blocked their path, James Blackburn flanked by 2 men Cole recognized as Double Creek Ranch hands. "Well now," James called, his voice carrying across the distance between them. "Isn't this cozy?" Cole signaled for Bethany and Eliza to halt, positioning himself slightly in front of them. His hand moved to his holstered revolver. "James, bit far from home, aren't you?" "Not as far as you," James replied coldly. "Pa's mighty disappointed in you, Cole. Thought you were smarter than this." "Smart enough to recognize wrong when I see it." James's smile was without humor. "Is that what this is about, playing hero for a pretty face?" His gaze shifted to Bethany. "I can understand the appeal, I suppose. What do you want, James?" Eliza interrupted, her rifle now visible across her saddle. "You know exactly what we want." James's smile vanished. "The box my brother saw Cole take from your property. Hand it over and maybe, just maybe, Pa will be inclined toward mercy." "There's nothing for you here," Cole stated firmly. "Ride back to your father and tell him it's over." James laughed. "Over? It's barely begun." He nodded to his companions, who spread out slightly. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way, your choice." Cole assessed their options. 3 against 3 might seem even odds, but Bethany had no experience with firearms, making their tactical position weak. Fighting would likely end badly. "Let the women go," Cole suggested. "This is between your father and me now. Nice try." James drew his revolver casually. "No one's going anywhere until we get what we came for." The tension stretched, neither side willing to make the first move. Then, unexpectedly, Bethany spoke. "I have what you want," she announced, nudging her horse forward slightly. "But not with me." James's eyes narrowed. "Explain." The documents were divided, Bethany improvised smoothly. Half are with us. The other half have already been sent to Marshal Parker in Fort Worth with instructions to open them if we don't arrive safely. It was a bluff, a desperate one, but delivered with such conviction that even Cole nearly believed her. James hesitated, uncertainty flashing across his face. "You're lying." "Am I?" Bethany met his gaze steadily. "Are you willing to take that chance? Because if anything happens to us, your father's crimes become public knowledge immediately." The standoff continued, James clearly weighing his options. Finally, he holstered his weapon. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." "It can be," Cole countered. "Tell Victor to let it go." "These documents are 20 years old. No one cares anymore except him." "You don't understand my father at all," James replied grimly. "He doesn't forget and he doesn't forgive." He turned his horse. "We'll be seeing you again, count on it." They watched in tense silence as the three riders departed, taking a side trail that led back toward Trinity. "That was quick thinking," Cole said to Bethany once they were alone. "And completely fabricated," she admitted. "I doubt they believed me." "They believed you enough to hesitate," Eliza observed. "But James is right, this isn't over. They'll regroup and come after us again." Cole nodded in agreement. "We need to push harder, ride through the night if necessary. Fort Worth is still a day and a half away at our current pace." They continued eastward with renewed urgency, the encounter with James having shattered any illusion of security. The trail grew steeper as they entered hill country, slowing their progress despite their determination. By nightfall, they had reached a ridge overlooking a wide valley. In the far distance, the lights of a small settlement twinkled in the gathering darkness. Riverdale, Cole identified it. "About halfway between Trinity and Fort Worth. We could rest there, but—" "Too risky," Eliza concluded. "The Blackburns have connections everywhere. Someone might recognize us." "We'll make camp here then," Cole decided. "No fire tonight. We can't risk the visibility." The night was colder without a fire, and their meager supplies provided little comfort. They took turns sleeping, always with one person on watch. During Bethany's shift, she found herself studying Cole's face in repose, the lines of worry smoothed in sleep, making him appear younger. Something stirred within her as she watched him, a feeling she hadn't expected and wasn't sure she welcomed. Her life had been in chaos since her father's death, with no time to consider anything beyond immediate survival. Yet here, in the midst of danger, she found herself drawn to this man who'd risked everything to help them. When morning came, they set out again, weary but determined. The terrain began to level out as they descended from the hills, making for easier travel. By mid-afternoon, Cole estimated they were less than a day's ride from Fort Worth. "We might actually make it," Bethany said, allowing hope into her voice for the first time. "Don't celebrate yet," Eliza cautioned. "This is when mistakes happen, when you start to feel safe." Her warning proved prophetic. As they crossed an open stretch between patches of woodland, the crack of a rifle shot split the air. Cole's horse reared, nearly throwing him as a bullet kicked up dirt just ahead of them. "Ride," he shouted, spurring his mount forward. Into the trees. More shots followed as they galloped toward the shelter of the forest. Bethany's heart hammered in her chest, the world narrowing to the movement of her horse beneath her and the trees ahead that promised safety. They reached the woodland edge, plunging into the cover of oak and hickory. Cole led them deeper, following no trail but instinct, until the sounds of pursuit faded. Finally, he signaled a halt in a small clearing surrounded by dense undergrowth. They dismounted quickly, leading their horses into the thickest part of the forest where branches overhead would hide them from searchers. "Ambush," Cole said grimly, checking his revolver. "They must have circled around ahead of us." "How many?" Eliza asked, rifle already in hand. "Can't be sure." 3, maybe 4. He peered through the trees in the direction they'd come from. "They'll be searching the woods soon." "What do we do?" Bethany asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Cole considered their options. "We need to separate, divide their attention." "No," Bethany protested immediately. "We stay together." "If we stay together, they only need to find one group," Cole explained patiently. "Separated, we have a better chance of at least some of us reaching Fort Worth." "He's right," Eliza agreed reluctantly. "I know these woods." I can make my way east while drawing them south. And I'll head north before turning east, Cole added. Bethany, you continue straight east. Keep the afternoon sun at your back. I don't even know how to reach Fort Worth on my own, Bethany argued. Follow the North Star after dark, Cole instructed, gripping her shoulders gently. Ride until you reach the Trinity River, then follow it south. You'll reach Fort Worth by morning. Tears threatened, but Bethany blinked them back. And if we get separated, how will I find you? Ask for Marshall Parker at the Federal Building. Cole's hands tightened briefly on her shoulders. Bethany, you can do this. I've seen your strength. Take these, Eliza said, handing her the documents from the metal box. We'll each carry some, but you should have the most important ones, the deeds and the letter from the railroad commissioner. Bethany tucked them securely inside her dress. Promise me you'll both be careful. Count on it, Cole assured her, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. We'll meet in Fort Worth. With quick, urgent instructions and reluctant goodbyes, they separated, Eliza heading southeast, Cole northwest, and Bethany due east as planned. Alone for the first time since arriving in Texas, Bethany felt the full weight of her situation. The forest seemed alive with potential threats, every snapping twig or rustling leaf making her start. She led her horse carefully through the underbrush, moving as quietly as possible while maintaining her eastward direction. After what felt like hours, the woods began to thin. Ahead, she could see open country again, rolling plains leading toward a line of darker vegetation that might indicate the river Cole had mentioned. Bethany hesitated at the forest edge, scanning for signs of pursuit. Seeing nothing, she mounted her horse and urged it forward at a careful trot. The animal was tired but seemed to sense the importance of their journey, responding gamely to her commands. The sun was setting when Bethany heard its hoofbeats approaching from behind. A quick glance confirmed her fears. 2 riders, moving fast in her direction. Even at this distance, she recognized Thomas Blackburn's distinctive hat. Abandoning caution, Bethany spurred her mare into a gallop. The open terrain offered no hiding places, only the promise of the river still miles ahead. Her pursuers gained steadily, their fresher mounts eating up the distance between them. A shot rang out, wide of its mark but close enough to send a spike of terror through her. They weren't trying to capture her anymore, they were shooting to kill. The river appeared ahead, a silver ribbon in the gathering dusk. If she could reach it, perhaps the cottonwoods along its banks would provide cover. Bethany leaned low over her horse's neck, urging more speed from the exhausted animal. Another shot, closer this time. Bethany risked a glance back. Thomas and one of the ranch hands were less than 100 yards behind now, closing rapidly. The mare stumbled, nearly sending Bethany over its head. She righted herself, heart pounding, as the horse recovered and continued forward at a slower pace. The brief misstep had cost precious seconds. 50 yards to the river. Bethany could hear the water now, the gentle sound incongruous with her desperate situation. 40 yards, 30, a third shot cracked through the air. This time, Bethany felt the bullet's passage, a hot line of fire across her upper arm. She cried out, nearly losing her grip on the reins. 20 yards. The mare was faltering, its strength nearly spent. 10 yards. The river bank appeared suddenly before them, a 6-foot drop to the water below. Bethany pulled back on the reins instinctively, but it was too late. The mare's momentum carried them over the edge. They hit the water with a shocking splash, the cold enveloping Bethany as she was thrown from the saddle. The current caught her immediately, pulling her downstream away from her pursuers but also from her horse, which struggled to find footing in the riverbed. Bethany fought to keep her head above water, the wound on her arm stinging fiercely as river water infiltrated it. From the bank came shouts and another gunshot, though whether aimed at her or her horse, she couldn't tell. The current carried her around a bend, momentarily shielding her from view. Bethany struggled toward the far bank, her sodden clothes weighing her down. Her fingers found purchase on an exposed root, and she pulled herself toward shore, every movement an exercise in determination. Finally, she dragged herself onto the muddy bank, collapsing in exhaustion. The documents inside her dress were soaked, but intact. Her horse was nowhere to be seen. likely either escaped downstream or captured by the blackburns. Night was falling rapidly now. Bethany knew she needed to move to find shelter and somehow continue toward Fort Worth. But her body refused to cooperate. The combination of days of hard riding, emotional stress, and now physical injury overwhelming her reserves. "Keep going," she whispered to herself, forcing her body to stand. "Just keep going." She stumbled along the riverbank, heading south as Cole had instructed. The wound on her arm throbbed with each movement, but a quick examination in the fading light suggested it was merely a deep graze rather than a serious injury. After perhaps a mile, Bethany spotted a small structure set back from the river, an abandoned trapper's cabin by the look of it. She approached cautiously, alert for signs of occupation, but the cabin appeared long deserted. Inside, she found a dirt floor, a crude stone fireplace, and little else. But it was shelter, and right now that was enough. Bethany sank to the floor, shivering in her wet clothes. The practical side of her nature asserted itself despite her exhaustion. She needed to dry the documents, tend her wound, and somehow get warm before hypothermia set in. With trembling hands, she removed the papers from her dress, spreading them carefully on the floor to dry. Her arm required attention next. Using a strip torn from her petticoat, she bound the wound as best she could in the darkness. Finally, she removed her outer garments, wringing them out before laying them near the fireplace. There was no wood inside the cabin, and venturing out to find some seemed beyond her current capabilities. Instead, Bethany huddled against the wall, drawing her knees to her chest for warmth. As full darkness enveloped the cabin, Bethany's thoughts turned to Cole and Eliza. Had they escaped their pursuers? Were they continuing toward Fort Worth, or had they been captured or worse? The possibility that she might be the only one left to deliver the documents weighed heavily upon her. And if she did reach Fort Worth alone, what then? The question of her future, temporarily shelved amid the immediate danger, resurfaced. She had no home to return to, no family beyond Eliza, no clear path forward, except, perhaps, the path that led to Cole Adams. The realization startled her that in the midst of chaos, her heart had somehow found room for something beyond survival. It was too soon, too unexpected, and yet undeniably present. Bethany dozed fitfully, waking often to check the documents and adjust her position against the hard wall. Eventually, exhaustion won out, and she fell into a deeper sleep. She awoke to the sound of approaching footsteps. Dawn had broken, pale light filtering through the cabin's single window. Bethany scrambled to her feet, gathering the now dry documents and looking frantically for a weapon or hiding place. The door creaked open. Bethany pressed herself against the wall, a heavy stick she'd found gripped tightly in her hands. "Bethany." The voice familiar, concerned, sent a wave of relief through her so intense she nearly collapsed. "Cole." She dropped the stick, moving forward as he entered the cabin. He looked haggard, a new cut visible on his forehead, but the smile that broke across his face at the sight of her was brilliant. In 2 strides, he crossed the cabin and pulled her into his arms. "Thank God," he murmured against her hair, "when I found your horse downstream without you." Bethany clung to him, the solid reality of his presence washing away the night's fears. "How did you find me?" "Tracked you along the riverbank." Cole pulled back slightly, his eyes taking inventory of her condition. "You're hurt." "It's just a graze," she assured him, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance and state of undress. "I fell into the river escaping Thomas Blackburn." Cole's expression hardened. "I encountered William and some hands, managed to lose them in the hills, but it was close." "And Eliza, no sign of her yet." Cole released Bethany reluctantly. "But she knows these lands better than any of us. If anyone can make it through, she can." Bethany retrieved her now mostly dry dress, turning away slightly to don it over her camisole. The documents survived, barely. "You did well," Cole said, his voice warm with approval. "Better than well. You're remarkable, Bethany Zimmerman." She turned back to him, suddenly shy under his admiring gaze. "I did what was necessary, as you would have." "No," Cole shook his head. "What you've done goes beyond necessity. Most women of your background, most people, regardless of background, would have crumbled under half of what you've endured." "Perhaps I'm simply too stubborn to crumble," Bethany suggested with a small smile. Cole returned her smile, his eyes softening. Perhaps that's what I admire most about you. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Then Cole cleared his throat, returning to practicalities. We should move. Fort Worth is still several hours' ride and my horse can carry us both. Do you think the Blackburns are still searching? Almost certainly. Cole helped her gather the documents. But they're spread thin now, hunting 3 separate targets. Our best chance is to move quickly while they're still divided. Outside, Cole's chestnut gelding waited patiently. Mounting was awkward with Cole's assistance, Bethany settling in front of him in the saddle. His arms encircled her as he took the reins, the intimacy of the position both thrilling and comforting. They rode southeast, following the river's course. Cole kept them to the tree line when possible, balancing speed with caution. Despite the lingering danger, Bethany found herself relaxing against his chest, drawing strength from his steady presence. "What happens when we reach Fort Worth?" she asked eventually, voicing the question that had troubled her through the night. "After we deliver the documents." Cole was silent for a moment, his breath warm against her hair. "I can't return to Trinity, not after this, because of the Blackburns." Yes, his arms tightened slightly around her. But that was always a temporary situation. After Sarah died, I needed distance. Trinity provided that. And now, Bethany held her breath, waiting for his answer. "Now I find I'm looking forward rather than back." Cole's voice dropped lower. For the first time in 3 years, Bethany's heart quickened at his words and the meaning behind them. Looking forward to what? Cole guided the horse around a fallen log before responding. "That depends, I suppose, on what you're planning. After Fort Worth." "I haven't had the luxury of planning beyond survival recently," Bethany admitted. "Before my father died, I had certain expectations: marriage to someone from our social circle, a comfortable Boston life. Now those expectations are gone," Cole finished for her. Along with the constraints they carried, Bethany considered this. "Yes, I suppose they are." Is that a loss or a liberation? The question struck her as profoundly important. Both, perhaps, but increasingly it feels like the latter. They crested a rise, and suddenly Fort Worth appeared in the valley below a growing city with buildings of brick and stone, so different from the wooden structures of Trinity. The sight brought a surge of hope, mixed with uncertainty about what awaited them. "We made it," Bethany whispered. "Almost," Cole cautioned. "We still need to reach Parker without being intercepted." They descended toward the city, joining the stream of travelers on the main road. Fort Worth in 1874 was a bustling cattle town, the streets crowded with cowboys, merchants, and the occasional well-dressed businessman. Their disheveled appearance drew curious glances, but no particular attention in a place accustomed to rough travelers. Cole guided them directly to the federal building, a 2-story stone structure with the United States flag flying above it. He dismounted first, then helped Bethany down, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Stay close," he murmured as they climbed the steps. Inside, they asked for Marshal Parker and were directed to an office at the end of a long hallway. Cole knocked, his posture tense with anticipation. "Enter," called a gruff voice from within. Robert Parker was a barrel-chested man in his 50s, with a neatly trimmed beard gone mostly to gray and keen eyes that missed nothing. He looked up from his desk as they entered, recognition dawning as he saw Cole. "Adams? Well, I'll be damned." He stood, extending a hand that Cole clasped firmly. "Your telegram had me wondering what trouble you'd found yourself in." "Plenty," Cole admitted. "This is Miss Bethany Zimmerman. We need your help, Bob." Parker gestured to chairs before his desk. "Sit. You both look about ready to collapse." Over the next hour, they related the entire story: Henry Zimmerman's letter, the documents, Victor Blackburn's pursuit, and their narrow escape. Parker listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly serious. "These are serious allegations," he said when they'd finished. "But with these documents," he tapped the papers Bethany had provided, "there's enough here for an investigation, at least." "Will that be enough to stop Blackburn?" Bethany asked. Parker sighed. "Victor Blackburn has money and influence. This won't be quick or easy." "But yes, It should be enough to make him back off while we investigate, especially if he knows we have these documents. And Eliza, Bethany pressed, she's still out there somewhere. I'll send deputies to search for her immediately, Parker promised. And place you both under protective custody until this is resolved. Cole and Bethany exchanged glances. How long might that be? Cole asked. Hard to say. Weeks, possibly months if it goes to trial. Parker studied them thoughtfully. You're welcome to stay in Fort Worth, of course. I can arrange accommodations. Thank you, Bethany said sincerely. We're grateful for any assistance. As Parker wrote out orders for his deputies, Bethany found herself wondering about those weeks, possibly months. What would they mean for her, for Cole, for whatever was growing between them? Parker arranged rooms for them at a reputable hotel near the federal building, with a deputy stationed in the hallway for protection. After days on the trail, the prospect of a real bed, hot bath, and proper meals seemed like unimaginable luxury. Before separating to their respective rooms, Cole and Bethany stood awkwardly in the hotel corridor. Get some rest, Cole said finally. You're safe now. Bethany nodded, suddenly reluctant to part from him. The words she wanted to say seemed stuck in her throat. He waited, his eyes gentle on her face. Thank you, she managed finally, for everything. It wasn't what she'd meant to say, but Cole seemed to understand nonetheless. He took her hand, squeezing it briefly. No need for thanks between friends. Is that what we are? Bethany asked softly. Friends? Something flickered in Cole's eyes, uncertainty, perhaps, or hope. For now, he replied, his voice equally soft. The rest, we have time to figure out. With that, he released her hand and stepped back. Good night, Bethany. Good night, Cole. In her room, Bethany luxuriated in a hot bath, washing away the dirt and fear of the past days. Her arm had been properly bandaged by a doctor Parker had summoned, the wound declared minor and unlikely to leave a significant scar. As she prepared for bed, a knock at her door startled her. Wrapping her dressing gown more tightly around herself, she approached cautiously. Who is it? It's me, came Eliza's welcome voice. Bethany threw open the door to find her cousin standing there, looking exhausted but uninjured. Eliza, she pulled the older woman into a tight embrace. You made it. Barely, Eliza admitted, returning the hug before entering the room. Had to hide in a hollow tree for hours while James Blackburn and his men searched the woods. Finally lost them near Riverdale. Marshal Parker has deputies searching for you. So I gathered when one of them found me just outside town. Eliza sank into a chair. Cole told me what happened. You were very brave. Bethany shook her head. I was terrified most of the time. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Eliza observed. It's continuing despite it. They talked late into the night, the shared danger having forged a bond between them that transcended their brief acquaintance. Eliza spoke of her life in Trinity, of the isolation she'd endured after Henry left, and of her determination to maintain her independence despite Victor Blackburn's pressure. What will you do now? Bethany asked eventually. Will you return to the farm? Eliza considered the question. Not immediately. Parker thinks it best I stay in Fort Worth while the investigation proceeds. After that, she shrugged, the farm is my home. I won't let Blackburn drive me from it permanently. And would there be room there for me? Bethany asked hesitantly. At least for a while. Eliza's expression softened. There's room, but I suspect you might have other options developing. Bethany felt heat rise to her cheeks. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Eliza's smile was knowing. I've seen how Cole looks at you and how you look at him. It's too soon, Bethany protested weakly. We barely know each other. Sometimes a week of shared danger reveals more about a person than years of peaceful acquaintance, Eliza observed. But you're right, there's no rush. Take the time you need. After Eliza left for her own room, Bethany lay awake, pondering her cousin's words. Was it possible to develop genuine feelings so quickly? Or was it merely the intensity of their circumstances creating an illusion of connection? The next morning brought more concrete concerns. Marshal Parker arrived at the hotel with news Victor Blackburn had been served with notice of investigation, and his immediate reaction had been to hire the best attorneys in Fort Worth. It's going to be a legal battle, Parker explained over breakfast. Blackburn's claiming the documents are forgeries and that this is all a conspiracy to defame him. "They're not forgeries," Eliza stated firmly. "I believe you," Parker assured her, "but proving their authenticity will take time. Meanwhile, I've stationed deputies in Trinity to ensure there's no retaliation against your property." "And the Blackburn boys?" Cole asked, "under orders to stay away from all of you." Parker's expression was grim. "Whether they'll obey those orders is another matter. I suggest none of you travel alone for the foreseeable future." The days that followed fell into an unexpected pattern. Mornings were often spent at the federal building, answering questions as Parker built his case. Afternoons were their own, to explore Fort Worth or rest from their ordeal. Cole found work at a local livery stable temporary employment that utilized his skills with horses while keeping him close to the federal building. Bethany, with fewer immediate options, spent time with Eliza, learning about the cousin she'd never known and the Texas life so different from her Boston upbringing. A week passed, then two. The initial fear of Blackburn retaliation faded as Parker's investigation gained momentum. Other witnesses came forward, competitors who'd been threatened, officials who'd been pressured, suggesting Victor's influence was already waning as word of the investigation spread. Throughout this time, Bethany and Cole circled each other cautiously. They dined together frequently, often with Eliza present, and occasionally walked along Fort Worth's developing streets in the cool of evening. Their conversations deepened, revealing shared values despite their different backgrounds. On one such evening, nearly 3 weeks after their arrival in Fort Worth, they strolled along the Trinity River, watching the sunset paint the water with gold and crimson. "Parker thinks the case will go to the federal court in Dallas," Cole mentioned. "Probably within the month." "And then?" Bethany asked. It was a question they'd both been avoiding. Cole was silent for a moment, seemingly gathering his thoughts. "I've been thinking about that, about what comes next. Have you reached any conclusions?" He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Some. I know I don't want to return to Trinity, even if Blackburn is convicted. Too many memories there, not all of them good." "Where would you go instead?" Bethany held her breath, waiting for his answer. "That depends." Cole took her hands in his expression serious. "Parker mentioned that the Marshal's Service is looking for experienced deputies in the Northern Territories. Wyoming, perhaps, or Montana." "That's very far from Texas," Bethany observed, her heart sinking slightly. "It is," Cole agreed. "Wild country, but beautiful, room to build something new." "Something new," she repeated softly. "It sounds promising." "It could be." Cole's grip on her hands tightened slightly, especially with the right partner. Bethany's eyes widened as his meaning became clear. "Cole, are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that I've come to care for you, Bethany Zimmerman, more than I expected, more than I thought possible after Sarah died." His voice was steady, but vulnerability showed in his eyes. "I know it's sudden. I know we've known each other only a short time. But sometimes life doesn't follow the expected path." "No," Bethany agreed, her own voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes it leads you to places and people you never anticipated." "I'm not proposing marriage," Cole clarified. "Not yet. That would be too soon for both of us. But I am proposing possibility. A chance to see where this might lead, in a place where neither of us carries the weight of the past." Bethany considered his words carefully. The proper Boston lady she had been would have found the suggestion scandalous to follow a man she barely knew to the Northern Territories with no formal commitment. But that woman seemed increasingly distant, a relic of a life that no longer existed. "What about Eliza?" she asked. "I can't simply abandon her after everything." "I wouldn't ask you to," Cole assured her. "We wouldn't leave until Blackburn's case is resolved and she's safely back at her farm, and the offer would extend to her as well if she wanted it." Bethany smiled at that. "I suspect Eliza is too attached to her independence to accept, but she would appreciate being included in the consideration." Cole waited, his expression patient but expectant. "You haven't given me an answer, Bethany." "Haven't I?" She stepped closer, her heart racing. "I thought it might be obvious. I'd prefer clarity over assumption," he said, a hint of a smile touching his lips. Bethany took a deep breath. "Then yes, Cole Adams, I would like to explore this possibility with you, whatever it might become." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, Cole leaned down. Their first kiss was gentle, questioning, a promise rather than a demand. When they parted, Bethany felt as though something fundamental had shifted within her, fear giving way to hope, uncertainty to possibility. "There's something I've been wanting to ask," she said as they resumed their walk, hands now intertwined. "That day on Eliza's porch when you were leaving. You said I was in good hands, that you'd see me again. Why did you come back that night?" Cole considered the question. Instinct partly, something felt wrong about the situation, but more than that, he glanced at her. "I couldn't stop thinking about you. The way you held yourself with such dignity despite everything you'd been through, your courage in coming all this way alone. I didn't feel very courageous," Bethany admitted, "mostly terrified and overwhelmed. Yet you persevered." Cole squeezed her hand. "That's true courage." They walked in comfortable silence for a time, the river flowing beside them like a metaphor for the new current of their lives. "Cole," Bethany said finally, a question that had lingered in her mind finally finding voice. "Why me? You could have walked away when the Blackburns threatened you. You could have chosen safety, your job, the life you'd built. Why risk everything for someone you barely knew?" Cole stopped again, turning to face her fully. The setting sun gilded his features as he considered her question with the seriousness it deserved. "Because you're exactly who I need," he said simply. "Someone who faces life head-on, no matter how difficult. Someone with the strength to begin again. Someone who reminds me that the future still holds possibilities worth fighting for." Tears pricked at Bethany's eyes. "Why would you choose someone like me? A woman with no fortune, no connections, nothing to offer but complications and danger. Did you not hear what I just said?" Cole's voice was gentle as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You offer everything that matters: courage, integrity, resilience. The rest is just detail." In that moment, standing beside the Trinity River with the man who had risked everything to help her, Bethany Zimmerman finally understood what her father had meant in his last instructions. "Find Eliza. She'll understand what needs to be done." He hadn't been sending her just to deliver documents or uncover old secrets. He'd been sending her toward a new beginning, one he couldn't provide himself, but hoped she would find in Texas. Whether by design or chance, his final act had set her on a path to this moment, this place, this man. "My father would have liked you," she said softly, "despite our differences. Because of them." Bethany smiled. "He always said I needed someone who would challenge me, not merely admire me." "I do both," Cole admitted with a smile of his own. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, they turned back toward town, walking arm in arm through the gathering dusk. The future remained uncertain in many ways, Victor Blackburn's case unresolved, their plans for the Northern Territories still just that. Plans, but the path ahead felt clearer than it had in months. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, a small group gathered outside the newly rebuilt courthouse in Trinity, Texas. The Blackburn case had indeed gone to federal court, resulting in Victor's conviction on multiple counts of fraud and intimidation. His sentence, 5 years in a federal penitentiary, had sent shockwaves through the county. The Double Creek Ranch had been sold to pay restitution to his victims, broken into smaller parcels that offered opportunity to farmers and ranchers who had previously struggled under Blackburn's dominance. His sons had departed for parts unknown, their influence evaporated without their father's power to back their threats. For Eliza Chambers, the resolution brought vindication and security. Her farm remained hers, now expanded with a small portion of the former Blackburn land that adjoined her property, a form of compensation ordered by the court for years of harassment. "Are you certain about this?" Eliza asked Bethany as they stood outside the courthouse. "Wyoming is a long way from Texas and even further from Boston." "I'm certain," Bethany replied, her gaze finding Cole where he stood talking with Marshall Parker. "Though I'll miss you terribly." "You'll right," Eliza said firmly, "and perhaps I'll visit when you're settled. Assuming you send proper directions and not some vague instruction to follow the North Star." Bethany laughed, embracing her cousin. In 3 months, they had forged a bond that transcended their brief acquaintance family in the truest sense of the word. "Besides," Eliza added with a mischievous glint in her eye. I expect an invitation to the wedding, whenever that might be. Bethany blushed. Though she and Cole had grown increasingly certain of their feelings, they had maintained their agreement to take things slowly. The ring he had given her 2 weeks prior was a promise rather than an engagement, a commitment to build a future together once they were established in their new home. Cole joined them, nodding respectfully to Eliza. The stage leaves in an hour. We should head to the station. Their journey would be long stagecoach to Dallas, train to Kansas City, then another series of connections that would eventually deliver them to Laramie, Wyoming territory. There, Cole had accepted a position as deputy marshal under another of Parker's colleagues. The goodbyes were emotional but not sorrowful. There was too much hope in their future plans for true sadness to take root. Martha Wilson pressed a package of food for their journey into Bethany's hands. George shook Cole's hand firmly. Parker promised to keep an eye on Eliza in their absence. And then they were aboard the stagecoach, Trinity receding behind them as they began the long journey northward. Bethany watched the familiar landscape pass, a strange mixture of feelings swirling within her, nostalgia for a place she'd known only briefly, excitement for what lay ahead, and gratitude for the unexpected path that had brought her here. Having second thoughts. Cole asked, noticing her pensive expression. Bethany shook her head. Just reflecting on how quickly life can change. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined any of this. Cole took her hand, his thumb brushing over the simple silver band he'd given her. Regrets, not one, she assured him. Every step, however difficult, led me to you. How could I regret that? He smiled, the expression lighting his eyes in the way that still made her heart skip. We have a long road ahead, literally and figuratively. I'm not afraid of long roads, Bethany replied. Not anymore. Not with you beside me. As the stagecoach carried them north, Bethany Zimmerman contemplated the journey that had brought her from Boston society to the promise of a life on the frontier. She had lost much family, security, the comfortable predictability of her former existence. But she had gained something far more precious: love built on mutual respect and shared experience, a partner who valued her strength rather than merely her social graces. She said, "Why would you choose someone like me?" Cole had told her once, recounting that moment by the Trinity River. And I said, "Because you're exactly who I need." Simple words that had changed everything. Words that still resonated with truth as they embarked on this new chapter together, not as rescuer and rescued, but as equals facing whatever lay ahead, hand in hand. Epilogue: 5 years later, the ranch house stood on a gentle rise overlooking the Laramie Valley, its sturdy log walls and wide porch a testament to the hard work of the past 5 years. Spring had come early to Wyoming territory, painting the valley with wildflowers and fresh green grass where cattle grazed contentedly. Bethany Adams stood on the porch, watching as Cole demonstrated roping techniques to their 4-year-old son, James Henry Adams. The boy's delighted laughter carried on the breeze as his father let him try with a small practice lasso. At 30, Bethany had found a contentment she hadn't thought possible after her father's death. Her life in Wyoming bore little resemblance to her Boston upbringing, but she had adapted with the same determination that had carried her through those dangerous days in Texas. Cole had served as deputy marshal for 3 years before retiring to focus on their growing ranch. The skills he'd honed tracking outlaws served him well in cattle raising, and their operation, though modest compared to some, was prospering. "Mama, look," James called, successfully lassoing a fence post under Cole's guidance. "Well done." Bethany applauded, shifting the weight of the infant daughter cradled in her arms. Elizabeth Sarah Adams, just 6 months old, observed the world with solemn eyes that already showed hints of her father's thoughtfulness. Cole approached the porch, lifting James onto his shoulders. "I'd say we have a natural cowboy here. Like his father," Bethany agreed with a smile. "And stubborn like his mother," Cole added, leaning in to kiss her cheek. The sound of an approaching wagon drew their attention. Bethany shaded her eyes, recognizing the visitor immediately. Eliza's early. Her cousin had finally made good on her promise to visit, arriving in Laramie the previous day after corresponding regularly for 5 years. At 45, Eliza remained unmarried and proudly independent, managing her expanded farm in Trinity with remarkable success. "The stagecoach made good time," Eliza called as she drove the rented wagon into the yard. "And I was too curious to see this ranch you've written so much about." Dinner that evening was a joyful affair, with James proudly showing Eliza every corner of the ranch house and Cole grilling steaks from their own herd. As the children slept and the adults lingered over coffee, Eliza produced a letter from her traveling bag. "News from Trinity," she announced. "I thought you might want to hear it in person rather than by mail." "Victor Blackburn," Cole guessed, his expression darkening slightly. Eliza nodded. "Released after serving his 5 years, but he won't be returning to Trinity." "Where is he going?" Bethany asked, reaching instinctively for Cole's hand. "Nowhere," Eliza replied grimly. "He died 2 days after his release, heart failure according to the doctor." The news landed heavily between them, not exactly sorrow, but the solemn acknowledgement of a life ended and a chapter closed. "His sons?" Cole inquired. "Still gone. The ranch lands are all divided now, with new families building homes and futures." Eliza sipped her coffee. "Trinity is changing, growing even. Martha Wilson says they're talking about a railroad spur next year." Later, after Eliza had retired to the guest room, Cole and Bethany stood on the porch, watching the moon rise over their land. Cole's arm encircled her waist, drawing her close against the evening chill. "Penny, for your thoughts," he murmured. "I was thinking about paths not taken," Bethany admitted. "If my father hadn't sent me to find Eliza, if you hadn't been riding by that day. If James Blackburn hadn't threatened you, forcing us to flee together," Cole continued, understanding her train of thought. "So many moments where everything could have gone differently." Bethany leaned into his embrace. "It seems impossible that such a precarious series of events led to this happiness." Cole considered this. "Maybe not so impossible. Some paths, once crossed, are destined to converge again and again." "My practical husband, speaking of destiny," Bethany teased gently. "Call it fate or call it luck," Cole replied, turning her to face him. "Either way, I found exactly who I needed when I wasn't even looking." "As did I." Bethany reached up to trace the familiar contours of his face. 5 years had added a few lines around his eyes, a touch of silver at his temples, but his gaze still held the same steadfast warmth that had drawn her from the beginning. Inside the house, Elizabeth began to cry, her timing impeccable as always. Bethany smiled. "Duty calls." "I'll come with you," Cole said, taking her hand as they turned toward the door. Together they walked into their home, their shoulders touching, steps synchronized after years of moving through life as partners. Behind them, the Wyoming moon illuminated the land they had claimed as their own, not just the physical property, but the life they had built together, step by determined step. From desperate flight to lasting love, from strangers to family, their journey had been neither straightforward nor easy. But standing now in the heart of the home they had created, with their children sleeping under its roof and their future stretching bright before them, both knew they wouldn't change a single moment of the path that had brought them here.